And welcome back to another episode of Jason's Game Room, the only podcast here on YouTube that talks about everything gaming, from board games to dice games to CCGs to video games. Remember that day I talked about Pog? That was the best day ever, wasn't it? You know it was. That's why you keep tuning in. Look at you, you Pog freak, you. Ugh. If it has anything to do with the world of gaming and its many genres, it's going to be on this show, and you're going to want to keep tuning in week after week to see what I'm on about next. Because that's why you come here. To listen to me ramble on about gaming because you love it. Now, today's episode is based on something that is near and dear to my heart, and I'm going to be talking about the good old-fashioned arcade. Remember arcades? Remember saving up your allowance or any money your parents or family might have given you, or a couple quarters you found on the ground? You'd save that up and take it to the arcade and plunk those quarters into the machine so you could play that game as long as you could. Man, I've got some good memories from those days, and I'm hoping that all of you have these memories about arcades as well if you're my age, possibly older, possibly a little younger. A lot of us did it. And don't forget to tell me about some of your arcade experiences in the comments after the show. Now, one of the earliest memories I have about going to an arcade, I believe I was 6 or 7 years old, and my family, we still had our cottage up in a place called Wasaga Beach. In case you don't know about it, it is the largest freshwater beach in the world. It is a great place, and they had a strip there. One half of the strip is gone. It got demolished due to fire, unfortunately. And there was an arcade there, and I actually did not go there as a player. My dad took me in there, and my dad was never one to give me money for hobbies or anything silly or anything for that matter. I had to earn my money. But if he saw an arcade, he would take us both in there, and he'd hand me some quarters, and he'd go make a stack himself, and we'd play for a while. And that time I didn't actually play. He played, I just watched. He was playing some older games at the time, like Space Invaders and Galaga, because this was the mid-'80s. And Nintendo was just about to come out, or had just come out, so you didn't see a lot of that anywhere. And the first recollection I have of being in that arcade was not so much the games, because I didn't play them, but it was the flashing screens, and more importantly, the sounds of the games. And a little while later, when we got our Commodore VIC-20, it was the sounds of some of those games that I connected with the arcade and what really got into it. Anyways, I don't want to get too far off topic, but just the experience of going to the arcade and hearing the sounds from the machines and the games and the screens flashing, and they just pull you in like that. And I remember when we first moved to Barrie in 1990, there's a mall not far from here, like 2 minutes up the road, called the Kozlov Mall. It was a much cooler mall back then. It had an arcade in the lower level called the Wizard's Castle. And we found that one day not long after we moved here because we had to go to the Zellers that was on the upper level. And when my dad saw that arcade, he said, okay, we're coming back here. We went back. And it was the only time, and you have to remember, this is 1990, he gave me a $5 bill to swap for quarters so that I could play. $5 was a hell of a lot of money in 1990, especially if you were a kid. $5 would actually get you a lot back then. So when he gave me that, and remember, my dad never gave me money for anything unless I earned it. I'm sitting there going, oh my effing God, I can't believe this. Him and I played most of the day. And it was a great time. And we got to know the owner of the Wizard's Castle. And this is why, another reason why I used to love arcades so much, is because the guys that ran some of them, not all, but some of them, were very personable. And I started going there with my allowance money when I could. And he recognized the fact that, hey, this kid's coming here a lot. He's blowing his hard-earned money. And he would actually flip some kind of switch on the game machine, and he'd let me try a game or two every so often to see if I liked it before I pumped any money into it. And I appreciated that. That was my main arcade for years up until when it closed down. I would go there and try some of the new games for free, and then I'd start pumping in my quarters or whatnot. Even when the games went up to 50 cents, there were so many great games, and a lot of the ones I enjoyed were put out by Sega. They were games that popped up on the Genesis after a while, and before that, the Mega Drive. I can't remember the name of some of the games, but one of them was a helicopter game that I was quite fond of, and I got my dad into it because we had stopped in once. He said, okay, you could play a couple games while we wait for your mother. And he sees me playing this helicopter game. He goes, what's that? And I showed him, and he literally kicked me out and started playing and then pumped more quarters. And then we both got yelled at by Mom for taking too much time on the helicopter game. But it was a great time. Arcades were the best. We had another arcade here in downtown Barrie called the Happy Man. A bit of a dive. He had pool tables at the back. There was always a rough crowd hanging out there. But if you were playing the arcade games, if you didn't talk to the people on that small upper level where the pool tables were, they didn't bother you. They didn't care what you did. And Happy Man used to get some of the newest games right off the bat. Now, the guy that ran it wasn't as personable. You'd never get that free trial. But there were some cool games there. And unfortunately, the store that Happy Man was in ended up burning down at one point. And that was the end of that arcade. So at one point, we lost both of our arcades in town. And it was unfortunate, because it was something you still wanted to do. Trying to think of another arcade I went to. We're talking early 90s, because I do remember another one. I just don't remember where it was or who ran it or anything like that. But I remember the fond memories of going into these arcades and having that kind of fun when you could play games for a quarter. And you didn't have to worry about hardly anything else back then. You just walk up, change your money, get your quarters, and you were having the best day ever. It didn't matter what happened when you got home. Unless you didn't do your chores ahead of time, then you caught shit. But anyways, aside from that, some of the best times I can remember in that period was just riding my bike up to the mall and playing for a couple hours, or as long as my quarters would take me. Wow, I missed that. And it's interesting to see nowadays, I'd say in the last decade or so, that arcades are slowly coming back. We have one in town here in our downtown called Next Level Gaming, and I haven't been there yet, mainly because of the pandemic, and they're limiting the amount of people inside, and plus with the on and off lockdowns, you never know when you can go there. But this is an arcade that also serves food and alcohol, and it's not an arcade in the conventional sense with rows and rows of actual arcade games. They have a few of those, but they also have Super Nintendo, N64, PSX, any console, retro consoles like that, set up on flat screen TV so you can enjoy that. I'm going to go check it out eventually, and maybe on a future episode I'll have a report for you and tell you how much fun it was, because it's something I want to try. I actually know a couple guys that went and checked it out before the pandemic started, and they said it was a pretty good time. I think it's you pay $5 and you can play as long as you want, because while you're there, you're mainly spending money on the food and any drink, because you're getting hungry and thirsty when you're playing. So they don't have to rip you off on gaming, and I appreciate that. That's why I want to check it out. But it'd be good to get back into the swing of things. Now, I'm over 40 now, but I still have the inclination to go to an arcade and see how it works these days. I know there'll be younger crowds there as well, and maybe some older gamers like myself, but I think it would be fun, because no matter what video game system or anything for video games that comes along, and with all the technological advancement with the PS5 now and everything the Xbox is doing, I still hanker for some good old-fashioned arcade fun, and I miss it. It's not the same when you go into a place like Dave & Buster's or one of those adult gaming / restaurants, because they don't have a lot of the classics. They just have a lot of those ticket games and skee-ball. And skee-ball's fun, but it's not that fun. And when you go into an arcade that's an arcade first and nothing else, there's just so many things to choose from. And I can't stop gushing about arcades, because I grew up in that time period. And one of the mainstays of arcades, before I go too crazy here, is pinball. And there's a local restaurant / bar here in our downtown that actually has free pinball. And I've done it. And you know what? Pinball never gets old. I don't care what anyone says. One of the best arcades I ever been to, which again was the Wizard's Castle, he had, I think, 3 or 4 pinball tables. Didn't play him as much because I was busy working on the Sega games, but you gotta have pinball. Pinball is a timeless classic. If I was rich, I would have a pinball table. So there. Anyways, that's all I have to say about arcades today. As I mentioned earlier, if you have had any awesome experiences with arcades, want to share those experiences, please tell me in the comments below. I would love to hear everyone's experiences back in the good old days of arcade gaming when shit was real and shit was fun. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, tell all your friends, run around naked with a shotgun going, JGR! Don't do that, you'll get arrested and then I'll get in trouble. Man, I hate lawsuits. Have a great day, everybody, and of course, game on.